Hello, we're back. I'm so sorry. You're just seeing me basically in pajamas the past couple days, but I'm home for the day and I'm going to do some cleaning, but in my mind, I was going to do it. Oh my God, I look like death warmed over. Can you tell how... Ugh. All right. Not even a slick of moisturizer on my face. Okay, where was I? In my mind, I was cleaning when it was dark out. Like, that was my plan, like put on a good show, make some food. I don't know. It's not my daytime plan. So I had a big nap today. And, okay. I wasn't accepted to the program, the nursing program, because I'm missing a grade 11, math, like finances and something. We didn't even take that in grade 11. But apparently if I enroll in like a college course to upgrade, I'll get accepted. So, yeah, we will see. Hold on, I'm getting a thrifting coupon. No way. 40% off. Sign me up. No way. I am so excited. 40% off? Okay, what does it exclude? What color tags? Red tags. Okay, that means new. All right. So we've started this book, but it's so hard to start a new book because I'm just never satisfied. Like, I don't know. It's just not satisfying to me because I'm still trapped in the last book. And I really, really love the last book. So even when I was reading this one, I'm like, I do like it. And I do think it's going to be good. So I thought I'll do that thing where I just like read a little bit of a few different ones. And then if one like really grabs right away, then we will start it. Okay. This is one that I have wanted to read for a long time. It was first published in 1966 by Jon and Rumer Godden, both girls, sisters. And it's called Two Under the Indian Sun. The back says, one day in November 1914, two little English girls were taken to India to spend 5 years with their parents. Two little girls in heavy dresses, boxy jackets, and hair drawn back stiffly over pale gnome faces. They moved from a formal atmosphere of Maida Vale, aunts, sauceless cod, and prayers said out loud, to a country of heat, poverty, and disease. A funny, mischievous pair they must have been. It is a charming book. That's from the Daily Mail. The Guardian says, an enchanting book, more than a picture of life in India in the imperial past. It is an opening into the adult world as children see it. And the Yorkshire Post says, the happiness of these years and their great love for India emerge in a lively and perceptive account of childhood, wistful, sad, funny, and wise by turn. I've had this book for a long time. Yeah, so it looks like this. And let's jump in. I don't know why I'm being so weird. I think I'm just tired and I'm don't feel like myself the past couple days. I'm gonna really need some help because there are a lot of names I won't be able to. Okay. Preface. This is not I'm already starting. Word. This is not an autobiography as much as an evocation of a time that is gone. A few years that will always be timeless for us. An evocation that we hope is as truthful as memory can be. Have we been truthful? We only know we have tried to tell the truth about ourselves as we thought we were, and about other people, perhaps not as they really were, but as we remember them or think we do. Our own and other people's errors of memory will not matter if we have succeeded in evoking, if not the reality, the significance. Sorry, Timmy just came running at me. Hi, Baba. Even in the timelessness of India, things change. Now let's look up our first word. Okay. Okay. Make sure my volume's up.
Narayanganj.
Hold on.
Narayanganj. Narayanganj.
Okay. Narayanganj. I'm sure that an Indian person would be like, wrong. Okay. Narayanganj, our hometown in East Bengal, used to be part of the subcontinent of India. Now it is in Pakistan. Dhaka, our university city, is Pakistan's capital in the east. Things change. We change. No one can relive a day as it really was. Too much has intervened, and we, Jon and Rumer, know we have gone back forewarned and forearmed with all that we have learned and experienced since we were small girls, things we did not know or even dream of then. But gone back trying to tread lightly, not overweigh or blur what was a singularly happy time. There were dark moments, of course, dark streaks, but it was happy. Children in India are greatly loved and indulged, and we never felt that we were foreigners, not India's own. We felt at home, safely held in her large, warm embrace, content as we never were to be content in our own country. Later, when we were older, our happiness at finding ourselves in India again was shadowed by the poverty and suffering around us, which as children we had seen but not realized. Book after book is written about India now, emphasizing her appalling problems of overpopulation, starvation, disease, her struggle to survive. All this is sadly true, and anyone who loves India must grieve deeply over these things and feel apprehensive about the future. But they are not the whole truth. There are millions of beggars in India, thousands of disproportionately rich men, millions of refugees, but many, many, many millions of people in the middle way, living, as in any country, a middling way of life, dignified, honorable, content in their standard. Even among the poor, there is laughter, small pleasures in life, simply because it is life. Perhaps some of those dismayed authors had seen little beyond the big, often squalid cities, the new dams and factories, the acknowledged sights. Their books often give the impression that India is a drab country. Even as children, we knew it was a wonderful land, a continent of every kind of climate, from the great snows and blizzards and glaciers of the north to arid desert plains, of forests, rivers, lakes, of every kind of plant, from alpines to tropical, of an infinite variety of animal, bird, reptile, and insect, and every kind of people. Even in the small compass of our home, a child's world, some of that wonder filtered through to us. We hope a little of it has found its way through us into this book. Ooh, okay. See, what I'm looking for when I start a book after I've read one that I really like is a sort of use of language. Now, I didn't find it yet in this, even though I'm interested. However, I am finding it in the preface to this. So my fingers are crossed and I'm excited. Okay, now let's have a little chitty chat. So guys, I don't see myself lately. Maybe I'm overthinking, because maybe I see myself to everyone else. I don't feel myself, I think, is the problem. I think I'm going through the breakup now. I think I skipped, like, did I cry before? I don't even remember. I don't know. I'm crying more now than I did when it happened. Like, I didn't cry, period, when it happened, but now I am like weepy daily. So if I seem off, I think I am just processing now. There was like a delay, and but hey, I'm working out every day now. I think I told you that. So I'm trying to be productive through the grief. So yeah. Anyway, thank you for being with me, and let's start chapter 1 because I'm excited. Because I'm really hoping that I'm gonna. It has to have a bone. You know what I mean? Whatever you're reading after a book that you really like, it has to be something for you to like latch onto. And prologue. Then everything was clear. Each thing was only itself. Joy was joy. Hope was hope. Fear and sorrow were fear and sorrow. Pain was simply pain. They had not yet trespassed into one another, not merged. Afterwards, life inevitably thickened, became hazed and alloyed, but then it was clear. In those days, all English people living and working in the East, except those who were very poor or very wise, sent their children back to England to be brought up, even though this meant years of separation during which the children were exiles. We, Jon and Rumer, were 2 small English girls. India was where our father worked, and we lived there until we were left with our grandmother in London, far from our home. Then suddenly we were fetched back, reprieved. In a cabin on the peninsular and oriental liner Persia, on a November afternoon, we stood side by side, looking at the aunt who had come to fetch us, take us away from London because of the Zeppelins. We were not sure what Zeppelins were, but this was November of 1914. It had all happened so quickly that we were bewildered and a little frightened. John's eyes, dark and lustrous, were at that moment as shy as a doe's, though they could be as fierce as a tiger's. She was a contradictory child, arrogant and timid. The more timid she felt, the more arrogant she became. John's fearfully brave, Rumer often said. Rumer's eyes were just plain alarmed, plain because she was plain, with a high bridge nose that did not match the rest of her. But even in their shyness and alarm, both pairs of our eyes were taking in every least thing. The cabin was inviting, with its white-paneled walls and its bunks, made up, ready to get into. White sheets, turned down over white cotton counterpanes stamped with the letters P and O. A miniature mahogany and brass ladder was placed to lead up to the top bunk. Who would go up it and sleep there? Rumer's eyes gleamed, but she knew already who it would be. John, rightfully, because John was the eldest by 16 months. Wrongfully, because she always got her own way. Her rule was unquestioned. But you should be kind to your sister, our nurse in London had often told her. Be kind to Rumer and help her. And aren't I kind? Don't I help her? Said John. Aren't I always telling her what a fool she is? Compared to John, she was a fool. John could floor grown-ups with a logic that was unanswerable, and she was dauntless. And now Rumer stayed in her protecting shadow, surveying this new aunt. It had been altogether a time of aunts. The 2 who had brought us to Tilbury, handing us over to Aunt Mary, were even now picking their way through the warehouses behind the quay towards the boat train. It was the last we had seen of them before we came below. 2 tall, thin, familiar figures made taller by long serge coats and skirts, strangely skimpy, and by their sensible hats perched high on their heads. We had just ungratefully rubbed their farewell kisses off our cheeks. They were Godden aunts, Fa's sisters, 2 of the 5 maiden Miss Goddens. This traveling aunt was a Hingley, of Mams, our mother's family. We had not seen a Hingley for a long time, not since a year and 2 months ago we had stood under the portico of our grandmother's house, number 4 Randolph Gardens in Maida Vale, London, and watched Ma'am drive away. It was the fashion then for women to wear toques. Ma'am had a blue velvet one that brought out the color of her eyes. Not one of us had inherited that larkspur blue, and only our younger sister Rose, the apple blossom skin that smelled of freshness and verbena. Ma'am was little and plump. The Godden aunts were tall, thin, and sallow pale from living in London. Their clothes smelled of London grime and slightly of perspiration. Coming from India, even as children, we noticed the unwashedness of English people's skins and clothes. We did not know then how ascetic these aunts were. I think that's how you pronounce that. What is wrong with me lately? Partly from lack of money, partly from a very real holiness that made them deny themselves the little they might have had. We only sensed that velvet toques and verbena were far, far removed from them. The motor was a landau, one of those with a leather hood, of which the back folded down, and we had been able to see the blue velvet toque being borne away. Our nurse in her gray silk veil, and the white bonnets of our 2 small sisters, Nancy and Rose, had been there as well. Nurse was escorting them to the ship, but we had eyes only for the toque. John was stony-faced, dry-eyed. For her, sharpening the grief was a feeling of betrayal, that Ma'am could leave us behind. It was a knife that cut so deeply that she refused to cry. Rumer was more simple, uninhibited, and totally without pride. She let out a howl that reached the housetops. It was immediately stifled by the nearest aunt, who swept her up in a surge embrace. There was an undignified scuffle. Rumer did not want to be stifled, not even comforted. She wanted to let her woe reach over those housetops, ring down the street, over the railed gardens with the asphalt walks and notices up on the tall spire of St. Augustine's Church that stood just opposite. To her, it was a passionate protest meant to shatter everyone, but John was old enough at 7 to know the noise was a scratch against the sky. There was no escape. Grown-ups won all the time. And too, for her, beneath the outrage and grief, was a flicker of excitement. To be an abandoned child was at least dramatic, and this dark, gloomy house promised to be interesting in a horrid, gloomy way, because it was so different from anything she had known. Grandmother and the aunts were living in what were then called straitened circumstances. We did not know what that meant, but there seemed to be a straight, hard line drawn each side of their lives, penning them in. They could not entertain as they had done when grandfather was alive, so they did not entertain at all, excepting the visiting missionaries and clergymen connected with our eldest aunt's. I would go for aunt. I'll try to stick with one. Aunt's work. She was secretary of one of the African missions. Nor did the aunts ever go out except to work, which they all did, or else for visiting among the slums. Life was regular and, in a curious way, dark as the staircase and the landings of that tall house were dark. It was so quiet that on the top landing one could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The calm and certain waters of this quiet pool must have been very much disturbed, or rather troubled, by the advent of Arthur's 2 eldest from India. It seems strange to think that Arthur was Fa. There was a photograph of him on our grandfather's writing table, a little boy with a cherub face, a dimple and gold curls, and wearing what looked like a frill around his neck. Grandmother was Fa's mother, and her family was distinguished in a quiet way, as the family portraits that hung in the drawing room and dining room showed. "This is your great-grandfather, Professor Thomas Hewitt Key," Aunt Evelyn Kate told us. "When he was a young man, he went to America as a professor of mathematics at the University of Virginia. He and his wife took 15 weeks to get there, and the fresh water on board nearly ran out. When they arrived, they were horrified to find that if they wanted any servants, they would have to buy slaves, and after 2 years, they came back to England." The handsome face above the white cravat did not look like anyone's grandfather. "He's like Fa," said John, which pleased our aunt. She was not so pleased when we named the professor Buttons, after the 4 large brass ones that shone from his dark coat. When we grew up, We were to discover what a remarkable man and scholar Buttons had been. 8th Wrangler at Cambridge, professor of comparative grammar at London University, one of the founders of University College School. But Buttons he always remained to us. The red-faced man in a blue smock and beret in the next picture was Jared Lee, a painter. And he had 2 beautiful daughters, said Aunt Evelyn Kate. One married the famous artist Wheatley, who painted the girls as winter and summer. The other married your great-great-grandfather, Richard Ironmonger Troward, whose picture as an archer by Benjamin West is in the drawing room. The drawing room, with its long windows opening onto the iron balcony above the strip of back garden, was lighter than the green-walled dining room, and the pictures, pencil, crayon, and wash were lighter too and easier to look at. Richard Ironmonger Troward, in a crooked hat and knee breeches, was ready to shoot an arrow from an enormous bow. We liked his tasseled boots. Aunt Evelyn Kate told us that he had not only been a wealthy patron of artists, but a solicitor who had prepared the brief for the prosecution in the trial of Warren Hastings, and prepared it on the very mahogany secretary table that stood between the windows. In the place of honor above the marble fireplace hung a picture that was delicate and pale. A group of rose-tinted faces looked down at us from a background of blue sky, penciled trees, urns, cupids. A causeway, Aunt Evelyn Kate said proudly. One of the few large groups he did. He was really a miniaturist. We did not understand much of this then, but our interest was caught when she told us that the lady holding the bonneted baby on her lap was the wife of the archer, and that the little red-haired girl at her knee was our great-grandmother. When she grew up, she married Professor Key, the one you called Buttons, Aunt Evelyn Kate said. They were married in 1824 at Marylebone Church, and she was given away by her brother Albany, who had fought at Waterloo and lived nearly all his life in India and never came home. They, in their turn, had a little girl, who is your granny. Our grandmother? Granny, sitting in her chair by the fire and chuckling at our astonished faces. We looked from her to the child in the picture and could not really believe it. In time, we too grew proud of these pictured relations and of our grandmother's ancestral tree so cherished by Aunt Evelyn Kate. But when we asked about the Godden side of the family, she was vague. Good yeoman stock, dear, was all she said. From Kent. Near Tenderden, I believe. Pirates and smugglers, if you ask me, Aunt Mabel put in. But this promising clue led nowhere. All we could discover was that grandfather, Granny's husband, had been a stockbroker who lost all his money, and that Granny had once had her own carriage and driven in the park. The poor old man had died in this gloomy house surrounded by his tall daughters. Much later, Fa told us that he had been a famous shot, a skill inherited by Fa. Mam had often told us stories of her family, the Hingleys, and of her childhood in the big house and garden in the Midlands, at the edge of the Black Country. Tell us about the pony, we used to beg. Tell us about the collies, about the scullery maid, about the time you upset Aunt Lee out on the swing. Those Hingleys were Quakers, hard-working, ambitious, and strict. They came originally from France to settle in the North and Midlands, bringing various skills. Mam's grandfather Noah began as a puddler in an ironworks, but quickly became foreman and, with his friend Naismith, invented a hammer that revolutionized the industry. He died a rich man, an ironmaster, owning steel and ironworks, and left a large family with such fascinating names as Obadiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Seth, Leah, which sound Jewish but were Quaker names. Mam's father was Samuel. He had had a white beard and blue eyes and had driven every day in his carriage to the works, somewhere near Birmingham. But Samuel was outshone by his youngest brother Benjamin. Uncle Benjamin was the clever one, Mam told us. He was made a baronet, Sir Benjamin Hingley, and was very, very rich. He had been like a fairy godfather to Samuel's children, but one who failed them in the end. He was suddenly taken ill, said Mam, and sent his carriage for his lawyers. It was a bitterly cold night, and the lawyer sent back a message that he, too, was ill with a chill and would come in the morning. In the morning it was too late, and the money that should have gone to Mam and her brothers and sisters instead went to the cousins, as they were always called in a derogatory way. We never knew their names. Ancestors and family trees did not interest Ma'am. Yet the grandfathers and grandmothers, aunts, uncles, and cousins who appeared casually in her stories, and only when they were necessary, were somehow far more alive than Aunt Evelyn Kate's revered ones. But then the Hingleys had a ruder, bolder blood. We were half Hingley, and it must have been with something like a sigh that in Randolph Gardens our Godden aunts bent themselves now on our bringing up. In India, children are largely left to grow. Principles are gently inculcated, not forced. And perhaps Ma'am had unconsciously adopted the Indian way. Perhaps she was simply liberal, but we had not really been brought up before. It was a painful process, and for us and for the aunts. Of that year, only glimpses of remembrance come through now. Our lives were lived a great deal round and in St. Augustine's, which was High Anglican. St. Augustine, I should say. Augustine. Okay. Which was High Anglican. Morning and evening we would say our prayers to Aunt Evelyn. Out loud, said John. It seemed an unpardonable intrusion. On Sundays, toys were put away. There was the collect to learn and say to Aunt Evelyn Kate, morning service, Sunday school, hymns, and Bible reading in the evening. We had lunch, at which we were not allowed to talk. In the dining room, roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, cabbage and water. Gross. And cabinet pudding, heavier than the Yorkshire. The cook had been Fa's and the aunt's nurse. She may have been a good nurse, but she was an atrocious cook. We always had to leave a bit for Miss Manners on the plate. That mysterious Miss Manners. We would thankfully have left far more. We were never left alone except when we were in bed and the light turned out. Nurse was relieved, on her afternoons out, by one of the aunts. Not once was any child from day school or dancing class or Sunday school deemed suitable to be invited to the house. Under the strictness, Rumer began to tell lies. This grieved Aunt Evelyn Kate, especially as Rumer was her godchild. A child who knew the number of the articles, 39, at 6 years old. Not to know the difference between right and wrong, not to care about the difference between right and wrong. John, who was a passionate, sometimes even a wicked child, was oddly good at Randolph Gardens, as if she were hypnotized, an effect that, later on, schools were to have on her. Once, it is true, she danced on the morning room table and broke Aunt Mabel's magnifying glass, which was in the table drawer. Danced on the table? But why, dear? Rumer's moments of rebellion were more successful. The aunt seemed unable to deal with them. For instance, while John every Friday slowly, unwillingly, with tears in her eyes, ate up all the hateful, sauceless cod as she was told to do, Rumer discovered that if she emptied her glass of water quickly over her plate, she was never made to eat the resulting mess. Once, in the busy Edgware Road, she dropped behind John and Nurse, stood her hoop on the pavement, and deliberately drove it into traffic. All those horses' legs. It was strange, inexplicable. Was John's dancing on the table such an outbreak too? Why should a child want to dance like a dervish on a table? The aunts grieved, particularly Aunt Evelyn Kate. Looking back at those tall, stiff, uncomprehending figures, one is filled with immense pity for them and for us. They could not have wanted us. Yet they thought about us, worried about us, taught us, or tried to, the truths of religion, manners and behavior, deportment, embroidery, music, duets played on the dining room Steinway with Aunt Evelyn Kate, our legs dangling high above the pedals. We were read to and read aloud ourselves, rather demanding reading for such small girls. John had to read from the leaders of the Times. Rumer stumbled over Dombey and Son. The aunts were so truly good, so noble and so dedicated, but never in all that tall, dark house was there a gleam of laughter or enterprise or fun. And slowly, slowly our lives began to loosen from their roots. Far away now, Ma'am, Fa, Nancy Rose seemed like little figures in a frieze looked at long ago and were being slowly covered over in the quiet gloom of the succeeding London days. That is perhaps the secret agony of children separated from their family, the agony that slowly, inexorably, they must forget. A year is not long if one is grown up. To 5 and 6.5, then 6 and 7.5, it is an eternity and can make an estrangement. In the Persia's cabin, Aunt Mary looked at us as if she had never seen us before, and certainly we must have been two quaint little objects. The warm, pretty clothes Ma'am had chosen for us had been put away by the aunts as being too short, too luxurious, unsuitable, their perpetual word. And now we wore heavy dresses with skirts of a drooping cut and far too long, heavy reefer jackets so thick and boxy they made us hold our arms out straight. Our hair was drawn tightly back so that our foreheads seemed to bulge over pale, solemn gnome faces. Worst of all were our new hats, summer hats chosen by Aunt Evelyn Kate as suitable for India, of brown straw, shaped like miniature dish covers and ornamented by Aunt. She made rosettes of heavy brown ribbon. Oof. We, in our turn, looking back at Aunt Mary, blinked. After the Godden household, she looked smart. Too smart, we might have said, in a braided coat and skirt, a thin pink blouse, a little hat with wings. If we had known the word worldly, it would have been in our thoughts, and we had a sudden surprising wave of nostalgia for the quiet, firm, gloomy plainness that was natural to us now. It was Aunt Mary who recalled us. That was the only word. The white, gloss-painted walls of the cabin had begun to have a faint vibration. The floor shook a little under our feet. A gull screamed past the porthole, and a derrick slipped out of sight. We were moving. Aunt Mary suddenly bent forward, twitched those brand new hats from our heads, and threw them out of the porthole. After our first stunned moment, we ran, almost like real children, to look, craning our heads out of the portholes as we stood on the berth. The ship was swinging into the river, a tug at either end, and there, riding on the eddies, they sent up on the whirls of the green Thames, among broken box pieces and floating orange peel, were our hats, swimming round and round, slowly sinking down and down. They were our last sight we had of England. We were reprieved for 5 years. Let's keep going, because now it's chapter 1. I really like this. This is exactly, I don't know, it's like, feels good, you know? You can tell when a book just feels good, and this one feels good to me. You might hate it, I don't know. You let me know. Okay. Let's,
Narayanganj.
Narayanganj. Okay. Narayanganj. That's the title of the chapter. Sorry, guys. I've been stuttering and stammering. It's just because I'm bloody tired. All right. In the background of our house in Narayanganj, there were always 3 sounds. The regular puff of escaping steam from the jute works across the road. Puff, wait. Puff, like the pulse of our days and nights. Then, from first daylight until dusk, the cawing of crows in the garden, and, all day and most of the night, the timpani of the bazaar. A chatter like sparrows, street cries, a woman wailing, a baby's cry. Sometimes there was a light rhythmic drumming, which meant the monkey man was passing. He always had 2 performing monkeys dressed up as a man and a woman. The servants used to gather round them and not let us see what they were laughing at. There were other intermittent noises. The works noise of trucks pushed by hand, of presses moving, chanting of coolies as they pushed or moved some heavy truck or piece of machinery, of bellows and iron hitting iron from the forge. River noises came, the whistles of a launch, the deep hoot announcing a steamer. Every now and then, there was a near and immediate noise of jarring, which meant the big green gates of the house were being rolled open by the gatekeeper. It was always an exciting noise, heralding an arrival. All those noises were still there. But the gates opened for us, Jon and Rumer, in the balmy noon of a December day. One of Fa's launches met us at the steamer gate. Oh, sorry, not gate, got. And we walked the short distance from the jetty to the house. I think I need my glasses on. Not these ones. Hold on. Okay, I try not to use them because the more you use them, the more you need them, but I'm tired, so. Okay. And we walked the short distance from the jetty to the house. Until then, we had not realized how homesick we had been. Perhaps the thing we had missed more than anything else was the dust, the feel of the sun-baked Indian dust between sandals and bare toes. That and the smell. It was the honey smell of the fuzz-buzz flowers of thorn trees in the sun, and the smell of open drains and urine, of coconut oil on shining black human hair, of mustard cooking oil, and the blue smoke from cow dung used as fuel. It was a smell redolent of the sun, more alive and vivid than anything in the West. To us, the smell of India. Now we met all these smells again. The road went through the bazaar, our bazaar, we were to call it, past the Anglo-Indian police sergeant's small stone bungalow, past a narrow field where the thorn trees grew, then came to our gates. They were high and green, made of solid wood for privacy under an arch of bridal creeper that canopied them with a cloud of green and white. I want to scoop my chair in, but Timmy is... Oh, he moved. Okay. He was laying and he looked so good and so sweet. I didn't want to disturb him. Blah, 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 blah. On the garden side was in the left-hand gate was a door, which was cut through for servants or peons to go in and out. But for any of the family, even a child coming back from a ride with her pony, the full panoply, there's so many words, I don't know words, okay, was gone through. The gates rolled open with a rumble that alerted the whole house. A wide gravel drive made a half circle around an enormous tree whose feathery green reached as high as the roof parapet. In December it burst into a tent of white blossom and had round its foot a bed of amaryllis lilies with red-streaked trumpets. Lawns spread away on either side, lawns of unbelievable magnitude, after the strip of London garden we had grown used to. On the left was a glimpse of a tennis court with screens of morning glory. We saw roses and sweet peas, and flowers we had forgotten, hibiscus and oleanders. Magenta, some kind of flower. Timmy. Okay, some of you might know this because, some of you are, some of you are probably gardeners. I'd like to become a gardener this summer, so if any of you know easy flowers that I could plant on my balcony that are low maintenance, let me know. Oh, there it is. Okay, pronunciation. It's French, I do believe.
Bougainvillea.
All right, well, this is what it looks like. Oh, this is so cute. The caption says, it's one of the hardest to pronounce. It's beautiful. Okay. Climb to the top of tall trees. Here was a new world of scent and color, warm from the sunlight. Added to the color and scent was the width. Is this our garden? Asked John, dazzled. And could it be our house? One supposes now that it was a monstrous house, a great rectangular pale gray stucco house standing on a high plinth that was hidden by plumbago and a hedge of poinsettia. Afterwards, in England, we saw poinsettias being sold singly for their scarlet at Christmas. 3 shillings and 6 pence each, said Nancy. Verandas, stone-arched and green-shuttered, ran the full length of the 2 floors, each arch ornamented with white carving. The roof was flat, with a high parapet which was cut into loopholes. Double steps, banked with pots of budding chrysanthemums, led up from the drive, and the whole household was standing on the steps to greet us. White-dressed, white-turbaned servants, a governess holding an unknown child with golden hair. Our baby, Rose? And a small girl who left them like an arrow and came running down the drive. Children do not often have the shock of seeing from the change in someone else how much they themselves have grown. But now we stared, and the feeling of a chasm opened in us. Nancy, when we had last seen her, had been a Humpty Dumpty little girl, chubby, with a dimple and a head of tight curls. The curls were still there all over her head. The dimple was there too, in a small face that now had found its character. The eyes faintly slant, the nose flat, the mouth tilted at the corners as if it were laughing. Nancy looks like a Gurkha, Fa often said. She had grown into a wisp of a child, with thin legs and tan-colored socks, and a vivid frock that, to our Randolph Garden eyes, were far too short. There was a new voice, too, at present shouting as she flung herself on the stately stranger, Fa. Although Fa had met us in Calcutta, he still seemed the strangest of anybody because, except for a bishop or 2 in gaiters, the vicar and curates of St. Augustine's in their Church of England cassocks, 1 or 2 male missionaries, the postman and the milkman, for more than a year we had had no contact with a man, and none of those was in the least like Fa. We were never to know if Ma'am were pretty or not. That she was Ma'am was enough. But it had always been impressed on us that Fa was unusually good-looking. He was tall and lean, like our Godden aunts, but wonderfully handsome. Aunt Mary was to tell us that when Fa was young, the Vicereine, then Lady Curzon, when asked at the end of a viceregal river tour through Bengal and Assam if she had enjoyed herself, replied that it had been rather boring, but that she had seen a young steamer agent who was an Adonis. So that's her father. Now Nancy swung on his hand, not at all in awe of him. She danced round Ma'am, then turned bubbling and chattering to lead us, Jon and Rumer, in. "I've made a surprise for you. There's pilau for lunch. Come and see my pony. I'll show you the kittens." She was the child of the house, completely at home, and made us feel like strangers. "Come, come," she begged us. No answer, no smile, no warmth. An extraordinary stiffness fell on us. We freed our hands from hers, and 2 cool, self-restrained girls walked with Fa, Ma'am, and Aunt Mary up the drive, said, "How do you do," to the governess. Miss Andrews kissed Rose and said salam to the salaaming servants. "Come, come, I want to show you my pony now." "I think we have to wash our hands for luncheon," said Jon. Our first luncheon, too, was an indication of how different everything was, and her excitement and pleasure at seeing us 2 unpleasant creatures. Nancy babbled all through its 3 courses. Then, we are allowed to talk when we eat with grown-ups? The food, too, was a revelation. We had hilsa, a Bengali fish, chicken pilau, pieces of chicken and rice spiced with onion, nuts, snippets of hard-boiled egg, and sultanas, and served with a dal sauce, a puree of lentils, and afterwards there was an orange mousse. I think that's interesting because obviously their parents are more engaged with local life and local ways of eating and dressing than a lot of British people would have been. Because any other reading that I've done, it's oh, Timmy. Hi, bud. Hi. They've really tried to keep themselves separate. A lot of people did. And come here. Come here. Let me move this. All right. There's my buddy. All right, everyone. Here's our buddy. Here's Timothy. Timothy Russell. Hello. Hi. He loves his mummy. Yeah, I know. Mwah. Mwah. What a stinker he is. I told my mother today I have never been so loved by an animal as I am by this rabbit. He follows me everywhere I go. If I'm cleaning, if I'm doing anything in the house, he just chases me. And if I stand still, I have to like spread my feet because he wants to come in behind me and sit between my feet. All right, you. Yes, I know. Oh, I know. Mwah. Okay, now where were we? All right. Fortunately, oh, am I ever going to learn how to pronounce this? Nara. I know it's wrong because I'm sure that, oh goodness. Nara. Pronunciation. Okay. What are you chewing on? Just stop.
Narayanganj.
Narayanganj. Okay. Okay. Where were we? Blah, 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 blah. Don't chew that one. Chew this one. I don't care if you chew this one, okay? Just chew it. Just be a nice boy. Oh, vomit. Okay. What?
Narayanganj.
Narayanganj. Okay. Blah, blah. Fortunately, in
Narayanganj.
no one seemed to have heard of Miss Manners, and our helpings were not put on our plates as at Randolph Gardens, with no regard as to whether we were hungry or not. We were allowed to help ourselves, waited on by 2 men servants in starched white akans and trousers and turbans that had a fan of white muslin at their peaks. We looked at them with awe-struck eyes. Our servants, we thought, dazzled. Over the bowl of pink Sandwich Island creeper. Pink Sandwich Island creeper. Oh, it's a flower. Okay. Jon looked at Rumer, and Rumer looked at Jon. We were ourselves. The same children, but already we were different. Rumer still had her look of alarm, but Jon gave her a little nod. After a moment, Rumer nodded back. Okay. When we were left in London, Fa was stationed in Assam. Now he had moved to Bengal. In this town of... It's just slipping out of my brain like water. I know.
Narayanganj.
Narayanganj. So that for us, it was all new. Nothing was familiar except the river. All our life was lived on or by Indian rivers, and was concerned with tides and weather warnings, with steamers, launches, flats, motorboats, any kind of boats. Narayanganj's river was the Lakya, part of the vast network of the Brahmaputra, and was the only direct way into the town. Stop chewing on my moo-moo. A branch line railway ran to Dhaka, 11 miles away, and, going to Dhaka too, was a road built high on a bund above the jute and rice fields. But these were only side routes. The main traffic was by a river, and we, Jon, Rumer, and Aunt Mary, and Fa and Mam, who had come to Calcutta to meet us, came in on the mail steamer that met the night express at 4 o'clock in the morning at the little junction on the riverbank, where the Brahmaputra mingled with the waters of the Ganges to flow hundreds of miles away into the Bay of Bengal. Rivers of European countries were pygmies to these. They were often miles wide, flowing between banks of mud and white sand from which fields stretched flat to the horizon under a weight of sky. He's just licking me. He's grooming me because bunnies groom each other, and they bathe the one that is the boss. So I'm the boss. Ow! Ow! That was my arm. Stop. Ouch. That was a bite. Okay. Didn't mingle with the water. Okay, they were huge. If we children grew up with a sense of space in us, it was from that sky. There was plenty of life in and on the rivers, rafts of water hyacinth that sometimes spread to such fields of floating mauve that Fa told us they blocked the river traffic and had to be dragged ashore and burnt. There was a life of crocodiles and fish, of porpoises that somersaulted in and out of the water, turning lazily over and over, their hides gray and bronze and bubble blue in the sun. I bet you that they don't have that kind of wildlife anymore because the pollution is just atrocious, right? Bubble blue in the sun. Herons and egrets waded in the shallows. Kingfishers perched on the marker posts. The steamer sent waves up the banks, and naked brown boys jumped into the wash, shouting and laughing. Will you stop being such a little bugger? Speaking of brown boys, the mail steamers were the greyhounds of the rivers, smaller far than the great heavily laden freight steamers, which often had flats lashed to their sides. Huge barges roofed with corrugated iron and laden with jute or tea chests. There were country boats, large and small, with wooden hulls and decorated prows. The prows had eyes painted on them so that the boats could see where they were going, which always seemed eminently sensible to us. They were steered by long, sweet paddles and usually had a single sail set on a tall bamboo mast. When the wind was too strong, reefs were not taken in the sail. It was simply changed for another, full of holes. Families lived on their boats under a wicker cowl set amidships, a small clay oven in an iron brazier smoking in the stern. These and the black crescent-shaped boats of the fishermen were small fry compared to the big high-stern wooden galleons, often carrying 3 tiers of sails, which could make the long, slow journey from the upper reaches to the sea. They were a majestic sight, slowly drifting before the wind, leaving only a ripple in the water, and beautiful in their pale and dark wicker work and wood, the color and patches of their sails, their studded brass. Stop! You're distracting me. Ferries loaded to the gunwales went from bank to bank. A cluster of buffaloes being washed by small boys lay contentedly in the shallows, only their snouts and horns showing. Sometimes a marigold garland from a festival or a funeral floated past, or the corpse of a kid. Oh, will you stop it? Must you always be chewing? Or the corpse of a kid swollen with the water. Sometimes there was a whole dead cow with a vulture perched on it. The river took them all away. Our lives were conditioned by our big rivers. They gave a sense of proportion, of timelessness to our small township and our family. Fa worked for the oldest of the steamer companies, who between them were responsible for navigation throughout Bihar, Assam, and Bengal. Assam. When he and Mam were first married, they lived in Assam on a steamer moored to the bank, and John was conceived and almost born on the river. Ever after, the river was part of her. This, if perhaps to a lesser degree, was true of the others, especially of Rumer, although she was born in England in a seaside town. John and she were so close that between them was a passing of thought, of feeling, of knowing without any need for words. When she came into Narayanganj on the steamer that first day, we both knew that Randolph Gardens had been only an interruption, just as later on, school would be an interruption. This river country was where we belonged. I love this. This is the book for me. This is what I needed. Oh, go on then. Let's keep reading. Let's get an hour in. If you hate it, you could stay for the rap. Timmy, you can't drink that. That's from this morning. Oh, good Lord. He loves tea, and he goes nuts, obviously, when he has it because caffeine, but he loves... You've just been in such a state today. I don't know what is wrong with you. And you're not getting this tea. You crazy little fellow. Chapter number 2 is entitled House and Household. What's that flag? It was the company's flag, of course, the same flag that flew at the stern of its steamers, launches, and flats up and down the rivers. But, oh, you little bugger, how very dare you? You broke my ring light. Oh, you make me so mad. Just one bite, and it's gone. Oh, well. Guys, we'll have to read by lamplight from now on. No ring. Oh, Timmy. You've done it, okay? You've done it. You've completely destroyed it. Look, one bite. Where are we? One bite. Oh, Timothy. Oh my, look, that one nibble. Go. You are full of the old Nick. You know you're bad, you little bugger. Okay. Oh, well. Oh, God. Okay, we're fine. He's just... Go eat something. All right. It's the flag, and it's on everything. Steamers, launches, and flats, up and down the rivers. But for us children, it was Fa's flag, just as the steamers were Fa's steamers. At sunrise every morning, the flag was run up on the flagstaff at the corner of our roof, at sunset taken down. The only other private house we had seen with its own flag was Buckingham Palace. Primrose ideas take root with frightening ease. That flag, the big house and garden, the ponies, the muslin dresses, we changed into every afternoon, the way Miss Andrews, or later, Nana, still later, Hannah, and always the gatekeeper, Guru, attended us everywhere we went. The difference between us and the milling thousands of Indians round us all added up to a princess quality that would have dismayed Ma'am if she had ever seen it. But Ma'am, in her simplicity, did not see it. In fact, all our elders seemed curiously blind, even more blind in the way 5 years later. They expected us immediately to adjust when we went back to England. When I see the king, Rose was to ask Ma'am seriously, when I see the king, what shall I call him? Your Majesty or just plain George? She had taken it for granted that we should move in court circles. Guys, I'm so tired. I cannot get this name in my head.
Narayanganj.
Narayanganj. In Narayanganj, there were no higher circles than ours. And what did she find? What did we? An ordinary middle-class house, one maid of all work, buses, a sensible dark blue uniform for a sensible workaday Anglo-Catholic convent school. Ma'am and Fa are cruel, John was to say in passionate protest. They were not cruel. Simply, I'm so bad with words. Myopic? Myopic. Let's look it up. Oh, Timothy.
Myopic.
Yeah, myopic. Meaning short-sighted in every sense. It's not a word that I use. I mean, I've seen it a million times, but I'm gonna start using it. Simply myopic. Besides, to them and Aunt Mary, our way of life in India was customary. The way in which, in their different degrees, most English people lived in India then, and when one looked behind the facade, things were not as extravagant as they seemed. Just as the flag was the company's, our big house was rented by the company for its agent. The furniture was chiefly ours, but excepting for a few pieces of Royal Derby china, the Dresden lamps that had belonged to Ma'am's mother, some silver cups and Fa's guns, there was nothing of value in the whole house. don't know what he's up to. He is just on a tear. Hold on. He is so bad. Okay. So nothing's theirs. They don't actually have anything of value, so they really aren't rich at all. The number of servants would have been puzzling to anyone who did not know Indian ways. We took them for granted. It's funny that Guru, because I have a friend and we call him Guru. Guru and the gardeners were paid by the company. You hear that boy running around? As was Fa's own Cease, which was a groom. But Fa had to finance the rest, and even with the then small wages, it must have taken a large slice of his salary. Yet there was no help for it because the protocol was strict and of the Indians' own dictating. The police sergeant in his bungalow could live simply with a cook-bearer whom he called Boy, helped by a sweeper woman from the bazaar. But Fa, in the company's own house, and in his position, don't jump, as an agent, had to keep the customary household. Even we, stop. Even we, so bad. Even we, though, did not, will you stop it? Did not have as many servants as, for instance, the Fitzgibbon Greys. Mr. I don't know what you're doing, but you need to get out of here because you're acting crazy. What did you have? Oh, he had a little piece of my cinnamon toast. It's probably the sugar. You're mental. Just relax. Stop it, stop. No. This is useless now. Okay. Mr. Fitzgibbon Grey was not only the head of our neighboring jute works, but was reputed to own the whole firm. Mrs. Fitzgibbon Grey had an ayah, not to look after her children. She had none, but simply to look after her clothes. In their house there was an especial bearer, an Uriah to serve drinks, a sweeper dog boy to groom and walk the dogs. Another reason for the number was that Indians are as hedged about with taboos as any union-ridden company. That Uriah bearer, though his caste allowed him to serve drinks, could not wait at table because he must not touch food cooked by people from other castes. No one else but a sweeper, an untouchable, could sweep floors, empty chamber pots, look after dogs. Yet if a crow fell dead into our garden, or one of our guinea pigs died, Nitai, our sweeper, could not pick up or touch the corpse. A boy of a special sect had to be called in from the bazaar. He put on his best shirt of marigold-colored silk to do this grisly work. Added to the strict rules of caste, callings in India are usually hereditary. Oh, good, yeah, he's chewing on the rug now. Yeah, well, whatever. Whatever keeps him busy. The gardener's sons would be the gardeners, the washermen's, and the dobies. Sons, washermen. Only there would be too many of them, John pointed out. Narayanganj would soon have been overrun with dobies. Ours had 15 children, so the dobi is the washer man. The capacity for work, too, was often not large. When the lawns were cut, 2 men worked the mower, one to push, one to pull, just as on the roads there were 2 men at each shovel, one holding the handle, the other pulling with a rope, 2 men on a pickaxe. If we were not allowed out without Nana or Hannah or a servant, it was because Fa understood Indian thought. We were girls, and in the respectable Indian families of that time, it was unthinkable for girls to go out alone. If our ponies were pretty, it was because Fa had an eye for a horse. The ponies were tats, country breeds, bought for perhaps £5. It was Fa who had detected the Arab in them. His own horse, Maxim, was provided by the company for driving to and from the office. It would have been better for us, as we were to find in as we were to find in afterlife if we had been brought up without these royal ideas, in the simplicity of our Hingley Quaker forebears, or the austerity of Buttons, the professor in Virginia, who had refused to own slaves. Better, said John, but not nearly as interesting. It grew more and more interesting. The Indians we knew best were, of course, our own servants. At first, their faces looked much alike to our unaccustomed eyes. Yeah, actually, did you know that we learned this in social psych? That for every ethnicity, every other ethnicity all looks alike. So if you are Chinese, you will think that all white people look alike, etc. For every single culture. Yeah, interesting, right? Dun, dun, dun. Yet they were utterly different from one another, and each brought a trail of other differences of place, custom, religion, even of skin. The only English employee, Miss Andrews, as with any other English governess we tried, quickly faded out of our lives, and soon after we arrived in Narayan.
Myopic.
Nope. Wrong. Narayanganj. Let's hear it one more time. I hope it's all friends here because, Lord, this is rough. Narayanganj. All right. Narayanganj. So she fades out soon after they arrive in Narayanganj. Nana came. She came, as we had done, on the mail steamer at lunchtime, and drove up to the house in a tika gari, one of the little box-like taxi carriages drawn by two skinny horses. She had a roll of bedding, a tin trunk, and on the roof a whole stem of red bananas as a gift for us. Nana was that's hard. She was a Eurasian. Oh, I bet she was beautiful. Mixed kids are always gorgeous because they get like, it's like the genes explode because they just pick the best, right, from both. Okay. Nana was a Eurasian, one of those luckless hybrids despised then even more by Indians than Europeans. She had been brought up in an orphanage by nuns of diabolical cruelty, and because she had been a brilliant, beautiful, and saintly girl, she was always pushed down, passed over. For days the nuns shut her up on bread and water. When her uncle sent gifts, he was rich besides being noble. They gave them to other girls, and once, to force her to tell a lie, the nuns held Nana's finger over a candle flame, but still she would not lie. Like a martyr, said John. Perhaps Nana heard a tinge of disbelief in John's tone because she flashed, "See, I have the mark now." "Nana, didn't you burn yourself there when you were ironing yesterday?" But we could not bring ourselves to say that. Besides, the picture of Nana's finger in the flame while she refused to lie gave us pleasurable shivers. There could never have been a more highly colored nurse than Nana, both in skin and behavior. She was tall, her skin a rich brown red, almost mahogany, and her hair, which was truly blue-black, fell to her knees. She had a high temper, too, which frightened Rose, and she used to smack us, older ones, with the bristle side of our hairbrushes. Oh, making a rash of scarlet pimples on the skin, but loyally we never told. We managed to hide her temper, but her sulks would pervade the whole house, and then we went about on tiptoe, as it were, keeping out of the way until the sullen cloud had lifted. Everything Nana did was dramatic. When we went for walks, she carried a great knobbled stick. Against mad-pie dogs, she told us. Once she had saved a little boy from a magpie. I held up Harry in my arms, though the dog tore at me. My God, it was covered with froth. If one fleck had got into a cut or a scratch, I should have died of hydrophobia. All the same, stick or not. When one morning an infuriated cow rushed out of a bustee, knocked Rumer over, and tried to toss her, Nana only stood screaming, not attempting to help. Ironically, it was a pie dog that drove the cow away. Nothing, though, would shake our faith in Nana, and we could not understand Mam's and Auntie Mary's lack of enthusiasm, nor the way in which they refused to see who and what Nana was. Mam made her wear uniform, dark blue, with white collar and cuffs, fresh and pretty, but to Nana an insult. Your mother and father are snobs, she would say bitterly. It took us time to discover what snobs were. When I don't think they are, said John, but my God, what snobs, said Nana. They do not know that I come from a noble family. My grandfather was a prince, a French prince from Venice in France. John, isn't Venice in Italy? Asked Rumer afterwards, but John was decisive. If Nana wants Venice to be in France, it shall be, said John, and Rumer agreed. We both wanted her to be the mysterious descendant of a prince. Nobody knows, said Nana, and my God, if you tell them. We promised not to tell, but, Ma'am, don't you think Nana should have dinner with you? Don't be silly, said Ma'am. Ma'am never understood how we adored Nana. Or did she? Nana had us spellbound. She even taught us to sing when, for the first time in our lives, our reedy little voices were lifted up, loudly sustained by her loud contralto. Way, way down upon the Swanee River, we sang, and Katie, until, if those children sing Katie again, I'll have their tongues cut out, said Fa. Nana could do the cakewalk. We did the cakewalk, and when her dinner was served to her in heartless isolation in the nursery, she would let John and Rumer steal out of bed and shared out tidbits, all three of us eating off the same fork. Poor Nana. She was lonely. We never knew what she did that brought the end. Perhaps we caught her Chi accent. We certainly all, or maybe it's she, her she accent. We certainly all started saying, my God. Perhaps she grew more sullen and rude. But Nana went, and Hannah came. Hannah was the greatest possible contrast. She was an ayah, middle-aged, dignified, infinitely more stable than poor Nana. She came from South India, and her home was near Madras, in a village among coconut palms. None of the other servants could speak one word of Hannah's native Tamil, but it did not matter, as she always spoke English to us in a comforting sing-song voice. Her skin was so dark it was almost black, and she wore her gray hair in a chignon. She had the multiple ivory bangles that in the South show a woman is married. But he dead, long, long ago, said Hannah. Silver rings on her toes, while her silver earrings were so heavy they had stretched the lobes of her ears. She always wore white saris with a red border and kept her keys tied in a knot that hung over her shoulder. Hannah's ambition, when she was old, was to go to the Little Sisters of the Poor in Calcutta, to their old people's home, sitting all day long, peace and rest, said Hannah. No naughty Miss Babas. Then she would pat us and say, not really naughty. That was the odd thing. Jon and Rumer, especially Jon, with whom no governess would stay, Miss Andrew left after a month, Nana in a year, were lambs with old Hannah. Hannah was a Christian, a Roman Catholic Thomist, perhaps the oldest Christianity in the world, because St. Thomas Didymus, the apostle, was supposed to have come to India teaching and preaching. Did he really? We asked Ma'am. There was no mention of this at St. Augustine's. Did he? He might have. Nobody knows, said Ma'am, but Hannah knew. He buried in St. Thomas's Mount, Madras, she said triumphantly. Every year, 10,000 people, hundreds of thousands, make pilgrimages there. Our own brand of Christianity seemed poor compared to this. Hannah was too gentle to say it, but she obviously thought so too. Where, for instance, was our devotion? Hannah got up at 5 o'clock every Sunday morning and took the train to Dhaka, where there was a Roman Catholic church and convent of St. Joseph. The nearest church of England was in Dhaka too, but it was thought too far for us, though we had a horse and a trap. Our Goanese cook was also a Catholic, but he certainly did not go all the way to Dhaka to church. When he was not cooking, he slept in the sun on a string bed outside the cookhouse, while his little mate scoured the saucepans with ashes, sand, and cold water. The cook seemed to know none of the prayers and Latin hymns Hannah knew, but all these were degrees in religion. Hindus have them too, said John. Just as Natai, the sweeper, kept apart because he was so low, the gardeners kept apart because they were so high. They were Brahmins. I dated a Brahmin once. They were Brahmins, the highest caste of Hindu. In fact, okay, fun story. So I know my last boyfriend was Indian too. Okay, so he was Brahmin, and when his father found out that me existed, he flew him back to India for 3 months to keep us apart. Okay. They were Brahmins, the highest caste of Hindu, wearing the sacred 3-stranded thread. Yes. 3 for the Hindu trinity: Brahmas, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva, the destroyer. If even our shadow fell on the gardener's food, it was polluted, and they could not eat it. Nor did they eat anything but vegetables, rice, and pulses, not even an egg. Govind, the head gardener, was especially strict and holy. He had a sacred little tulsi tree in front of his hut and burnt a saucer of incense there, pouring milk on the ground before it and strewing flowers. Govind is doing his puja, Nancy told us. But often he sat still meditating, and then he would not hear if anybody spoke to him. So he would he did puja every morning, and he put up images of like Jesus, and he got like those Catholic pillar candles. He put up like images of Mary and Jesus, even though I'm not Catholic, but he just did it like to honor my faith. So he would do his puja and he would include like my faith. It was very sweet. Fa's personal bearer, Jetta, seemed free from taboos and much merrier than the other servants. He was a Lepcha from Sikkim, the independent small state on the borders of Tibet. His village, where he owned a mud-walled house, some terraced fields for growing maize, millet, and sunflowers, was high in the Himalayas. Jetta was quite different from anyone else in the house. He was flat-faced, with slit-cornered eyes and a golden skin, squat rather than short, bow-legged, and immensely strong. Oh, that's what I love about, India is so diverse, and there's so many languages, and it's so interesting because, the closer you get to the border of China, the Indian people look Chinese, and it's just so interesting. And it's actually that way in Russia. The Russian border close to China, they look very Chinese, and it's just so interesting because people have just mingled, right? It's so interesting. Okay. He always wore white trousers and a white coat buttoned down the front, and had a little round black hat embroidered in black. When Jetta went with Fa to shooting camps, he took his kukri, a wide, flat-banded, and wickedly curved Nepali knife he wore in his belt. And he could have fought and beaten all the other servants single-handed, but Jetta only fought if he were drunk. He smelled abominable then, because he drank rice toddy. He was a Buddhist, of an unfervent kind. In Darjeeling, we were to see the Buddhist stupas, the monks with their maroon robes, the prayer wheels that turned gently round and round, and the prayer flags that sent prayers into the wind. There was always a mixture of mountain lustiness and gentleness about Jetta. Then there was the Muslim contingent, our table servants, and the Masalki, whose work was rather the same as the tweenies in the once-upon-a-time English household. He washed the dishes, carried hot water for the baths, lit the braziers, ran to and from the kitchen with dishes, and made the servants tea. He did not come into the front part of the house, except to blow up the brazier on toffee-making days, and he was not given white clothes like the other servants, but a plain khaki shirt. Mustapha, the young Kid Kidmutgar, a waiter, was a special friend of ours and handsome, with his dark curly beard and melting dark eyes, whereas the nursery bearer, Abdul, was our enemy. In fact, nobody liked him. Mustafa was an impeccably trained servant, but Abdul was a nuisance, a know-all, perpetually in trouble. He was 17 and of a peculiar brown color like pale liver, with oversized big toes. He was as ugly inside as out. He stole and lied, told tales and cheated, and he was always being sent away, yet always came back because Mam was sorry for him. Azad Ali, the butler, used to beat him. No one ever saw Azad Ali do a stroke of work beyond carrying a teapot or pouring out drinks or bringing letters on a salver. He stood behind Fa's chair at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, behind the tea table on tennis party days, and at Mam's right hand while she interviewed the cook and gave out the stores. He seemed to do nothing else. Yet, if he went on leave, the household fell to pieces. Azad Ali towered over everyone else in his long white akan and pleated turban, and everyone was impressed by him, except us children. We knew what nobody else knew, that once before dinner, on a dinner party night, we had chased Azad Ali with bows and arrows round and round the garden. It was true they were real archery arrows tipped with metal, but Azad Ali ran squawking like a hen until he slipped on the tennis court and fell, staining his immaculate whiteness with green grass. After he cried like Rose, said Rumer. Like Govind, Azad Ali was devout, and Mustafa, who copied him in everything, was devout too. They each had an inscription from the Quran bound with a silk cord round their wrists, the inscription written in Persian script and rolled into a tiny case of metal. We knew we must never touch it. As true Muslims, they were not allowed to drink a drop of alcohol nor eat pig. We often wondered what it must be like for them to hand us ham or bacon, unclean food. There is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, intoned Azad Ali, Mustafa, and sometimes Abdul. We never heard Jeddah pray. Far away in his own mountain country, the turning wheels and the wind-blown flags were saying his prayers to Buddha for him. Ram, 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 Govind would say over and over. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, said Hannah, and the cook. These gods were all there were. These gods were all there in our house. The house stood in its spread of gardens with, behind them, a great water tank. Bengal's thousands of artificially made water pools were always given that plain name, a tank that we shared with the huddle of houses, the bustee on its farther bank. The bustee's cess was emptied into the tank so that we were forbidden to fish there. But we fished. On the further side, red stone steps led down to the water. The bustee women beat their clothes on them when they washed. In the evenings, old men sat there in meditation, and in the morning the steps were crowded for ritual bathing. Along our private bank of the tank was the kitchen garden, with the stables and servants' quarters and their courtyard to the left, the cookhouse to the right, 100 feet or more from the house. In all that vast house there were only 6 rooms, but each of these was as big as a small ballroom, the bedrooms with dressing rooms and bathrooms leading out of them, while the dining and drawing rooms were double. The rooms were built for coolness, so high that they were cavernous, shaded by the verandas and they opened onto, and always dim, though the end rooms had windows with green shutters. For 9 months of the year, electric fans moved the upper air. The walls were whitewashed, the floors of painted stone. Nurseries were not called playrooms then, and nursery was perhaps a better word, the place where you grew up. Ours was downstairs next to the dining room. Its furniture was battered and haphazard. Our 4 private bookshelves had, beside each, a small private wicker armchair. The Malay prints on the walls had been in Mam's and Aunt Mary's Midland nursery. Nancy's bed, Rose's cot, and, until she left, Nana's bed were at one end. Hannah brought in a pallet and quilts. Big wardrobes stood against the walls. There was an old-fashioned dressing table and an ironing board, where the irons seemed perpetually hot, as our countless hair ribbons, sashes, petticoats, and muslin dresses were ironed. A rocking horse and Hattie, Rose's stuffed gray flannel elephant on wheels, were out on the veranda with the guinea pigs' cages. We saw real elephants when we went to visit the Needhams. Mr. Needham was advisor and manager to a Nawab who lived on a small estate not far from Dhaka. And to go there was one of our greatest treats, although it meant a long drive squashed into the yellow-wheeled buggy behind Maxim. After luncheon, tiffin, the Needhams called it. Oh, that's cute, because even now, my Indian friends they still call it tiffin, and they'll call it like their tiffin box instead of a lunch box. Tiffin. In the old pillared house, built in the days of the East India Company, Ma'am went to pay a courtesy call on the Nawab's 3 wives, and we children were always taken for a ride on one of the estate's working elephants. Once, when it was time to go home, Nancy could not be found. She was discovered at last in the elephant lines behind the dilapidated palace, standing in front of one of the picketed elephants and feeding it with blades of grass, one blade at a time. The big elephant, swaying above her, took her offering in the spirit it was given, delicately removing it from her fingers with the pink tip of its trunk and solemnly conveying it to its mouth. Isn't that sweet? Elephants are so intelligent. Animals were important, a necessary part of our lives, as they always were to be. There had been none in Randolph Gardens, nothing to care for, nothing alive to watch, except the London sparrows and a stray cat or two sitting on the sooty garden walls. Sitting us here in Narayungan, the garden was full of strange and exciting birds, and there were chipmunks with stripes in their backs, stripes that came there, so Indian stories tell, when the god Shiva stroked the chipmunk with his sacred fingers. Monkeys would suddenly appear in our tree, the small brown rhesus found everywhere in India, and the big, bold, bad languors who were Govern's enemies because they stole his carefully planted vegetables, pulled up the lettuces, and had a passion for nasturtium seeds. Meet me. At night there would be owls calling, and we would often see the dim forms of jackals skulking in the shadows under the trees. Their nerve-wracking howling was so familiar that we hardly heard it. As for tame animals, we had our ponies, and the fast-increasing guinea pigs and rabbits. "This place is becoming a zoo," Aunt Mary often said. Aunt Mary had her mare, and Fa had Maxim, and his old black cat, which still produced kittens regularly. None of these was enough. We wanted a dog each, preferably, but even a household dog would have done. Narayangad, I don't know, like every other Indian town, was full of dogs, pie dogs, unowned, unwanted. At first we agonized over their skeletal shapes, the sores and mange, but soon, like everyone else, we hardly noticed the pie dogs. Out of the villages, these long-legged, short-backed, many-colored animals with terriers' muzzles and tails curled like pugs' tails over their backs were often magnificent specimens, watchdogs and herders of cattle, fierce to strangers. You know what's interesting? So she's saying that like all the dogs clearly have like descended from terriers and like maybe a pug mixture. When I was in Venice eons ago, all the dogs that were there looked like they were all long. Like they had come from dachshunds or not corgis, probably dachshunds, but like every dog was some sort of a mix that was it was so strange to see. That was like 20 years ago now. "Why can't we have one, Fa? Your mother doesn't like dogs." "Not like dogs." We couldn't believe this of Ma'am. "Why not, Ma'am?" "Ask Fa," Ma'am said. She said it grimly, not sounding like Ma'am, and startled we turned to Fa. We soon knew the story by heart. When Rumer and John were small and we lived in Assam, Fa had 3 golden spaniels. "Though I asked him not to," said Ma'am. "The spaniels developed rabies and had to be shot. But by then they had bitten the whole family and all the servants. And in those days," said Fa, the only Pasteur Institute in India was in Kasauli near Shimla, 5 days' journey away." Oh my Lord. It cost a fortune to get there, said Mam, and Fa had to admit that. Not only that, he said. In the train, John had a high fever, and your poor mother was convinced that it was rabies. John could confirm the next part of the story, although she had been only 5 years old. She could remember the pain of the injections, 2 injections in the stomach every day for 14 days. Oh, my Lord. Nancy had been born in Kasauli, and it was no wonder that she had been a small and sickly baby, or that Mam was so ill she had to be sent back to England. If you were bitten by a dog here, or even licked, said Mam, those injections would have to be done all over again. Now do you understand? We understood, but we still wanted a dog. So did Fa. And before we had been long in Narragansett, he had another, Sally, a fox terrier. We soon noticed that Fa always had what he wanted: dogs, guns, fishing rods, sailing boats, although he often said that we children used up all his money. Sally did not get rabies, but we all had to have more injections because Nancy was bitten by a spaniel belonging to one of our young bachelor friends. Though I asked him not to bring it to the house, said Mam, and when it died of rabies, the rest of us, just in case we had touched it, had to go endure the treatment too. We did not have to go to Kasauli, though, or even to the Pasteur Institute in Calcutta. Our own Dr. Owen came to us. Dr. Owen was a Welshman, small, dark, and quick. We saw a lot of him because we were often so ill, and he soon became our familiar friend. Sometimes in the evenings, the big gates rolled back, and his high, open, black Ford car, the first car we ever really knew, a tin Lizzie, came snorting in to take us children for a drive along the Dhaka road. Jon and Rumer would sit in front, squashed together beside the doctor, who crouched over the wheel, his hair flying as he drove at what seemed to us a furious pace. As he drove, he chanted the lays of ancient Rome aloud in his rich Welsh voice. We would soon chant with him, and Tiber, Father Tiber, to whom the Romans pray, whirled with our dust over the rice fields. Hi, mister. Some of our illnesses were the kind that would have horrified parents living in England or America. Malaria, colitis, dysentery, dengue fever, bacillus coli. Dr. Owen, Mam, and Aunt Mary dealt with these calmly, as they did with boils and stings and accidents and injections against hydrophobia. Our tonsils were taken out by Dr. Owen on the dining room table. Can you imagine 1914, getting your tonsils out? Oh my God. Lord. Incredible. Our tonsils were taken out by Dr. Owen on the dining room table, carried up for the occasion to Mam and Fa's room, which for a few days resembled the hospital ward. We came to take illness as a matter of course, and after the worst was over, almost to enjoy it. An ill child slept in Mam's and Fa's room under a huge mosquito net that was a room within a room, and was allowed to spend the day in Mam's big bed. Aunt Mary would read to her. Hannah would gently massage her back and legs. Perhaps it was a mistake to make so much of us when we were ill. It was a shock later on to discover that at our various schools, that illness was almost a disgrace. The bleakness of a school infirmary seemed perhaps especially bleak to us. Mam's and Fa's room was like the keep of our castle. It was also more attractive than the rest of the house, with white... He's here for what's left of my tea. Oh, no, you get down. It was more attractive than the rest of the house, with white embroidered cashmere rugs on the floor, and the dressing table, Mam's silver brushes and mirror embossed with Reynolds' angel heads, which we thought were beautiful. Mam's bathroom had a real English bath in white enamel, though the taps did not work, and in her dressing room was kept the dressing up box. Aha! He just tried to pull that out of my hand. You stinker. Dressing up box. A high dome trunk full of clothes from a glorious past. Aunt Mary's room, where Jon and Rumer slept, was upstairs too, at the other end of the house. There were 3 suitcases, a wide main one of dark wood with... Oh, sorry, suitcases. Staircases. I'm like potted plants. A wide main one of dark wood with potted palms along its gallery landing, a side one painted white, and a rickety outside staircase at the back of the house, used for servants. We were forbidden to use that one, but all of us ran up and down it. A further flight, like a lighthouse stair, led from the side staircase up to the roof. The roof was flat, with a high parapet round it, and chimneys coming up in odd places, and nothing but the sky above. The parapet top was perhaps 2 feet wide, and from it we could look far over town and river, across to the opposite bank, and look away into the distance. We were high above the treetops, even above the great tree on the drive, and could look down into the garden and bazaar where people seemed small as ants. The flag blew about us with a thrumming noise in its ropes. The puff, wait, puff from the works, the crows cawing, all the bazaar sounds were faint up here. The only life was in lizards scuttling across the hot stone, and in the birds that are very present in every Indian sky, vultures circling, higher and higher, keeping their perpetual watch for something dead or dying on the ground. And the brown fork-tailed hawks, scavengers too, whose shrill musical cry was as familiar as the cawing of the crows. One hawk was always perched like a sentinel on the top of our flagstaff. These hawks were called kites, which was puzzling because up in the sky again, below the specks of those wheeling birds, fluttered and flew the paper kites flown from other rooftops. We flew kites too. Sorry, he's just sitting here watching me like, yes, go on. We flew kites too. We loved to fly them. Made of colored paper and fine bamboo, Indian kites are as brilliant as huge butterflies and almost as light. The gatekeeper Guru bought them for us in the bazaar and showed us how to glass our strings, how to run the fine thread through a mixture of flour paste and ground grass until the whole string was armored, and then to wind the string round the polished bamboo roller that had a slim bamboo handle at each end, with which our small hands could grasp. He showed us how to launch and fly our kites, how to send them higher and higher, standing with our legs well apart, holding our rollers in both hands, bracing ourselves against the tug and pull. He taught us how to make our kite bob 3 times as a challenge to the other kites in the sky, and then, as a distant cry of "Dari, Dari" rose from the invisible rooftop, to cross strings with our opponent until the vanquished kite, cut loose, floated helplessly away over the river. Sometimes we heard a shrill commotion in the road below, and looking over the parapet, saw a crowd of boys running with bamboo poles after a drifting kite, tracking it until it lodged perhaps in a tree, and then fighting to possess it. A damaged kite, mended and patched, could do battle again. Ma'am said it was not fair of us to cut the boys' kite adrift. They cost money, though very little. 2 or 3 for an anna. An anna was divided into 4 pice, and again into 12 pies, and below that were cowries. Perhaps those boys counted their money in cowries, and might have to save up for a week or 2 to buy 1 kite. We had pocket money, and if we lost a kite, only had to send Guru to the bazaar to get another. It isn't fair. We agreed, and went on fighting. This gave a wanton boldness to what we were doing. Perhaps nothing was farther away from Randolph Gardens than this flying of kites on the roof. But that was not the only reason we loved it. To hold a kite on a roller was to hold something alive, something that kicked in your hand, that pulled and sang as the string thrilled in the wind. The string went up and up until the kite seemed above the hawks circling in the sky. It linked us with another world, wider, far wider than ours. And we were linked too in the kinship of enmity with other unknown flyers on other unknown roofs, those invisible children. Indeed, the kites could have been taken as a symbol of our lives. Most children grow up knowing only their own world, their own kind of people, their own way of life. We were lucky. There were many different threads, coming from many places, crossing for a while with ours, often in a state of love and war, sometimes simply love, as it was with Hannah, sometimes war, as with Abdul and Azad Ali. Our house was English streaked with Indian, or Indian streaked with English, It might have been an uneasy hybrid, but we were completely and happily at home. I love this, as you can tell, because I've read for an hour and 40 minutes almost. Okay, well, I guess I should stop. I could literally just sit and read this, but I don't think anyone would get to watch it because it's, mister. Up. No. You be good. What? It's into you today. You're so bad. Okay. Let me just see how long this chapter is. If it's just a little, no. It's long and detailed, so I should stop. All right, I love this book, and I think for my own enjoyment and mental health, just because I've been a sad girl, I think maybe we'll read this one. And we'll still continue reading Haley Mills if you'd like. I can put up the second chapter. Hello. Timmy likes this book, I think, because he's been way more active. All right. Okay, thank you so much for joining me. Please comment. There have been no comments on the other book, which is why I kind of thought, look at me, 2 sets of glasses. Like, what am I, 100 years old? Okay. There have been no comments on the other one, so I just kind of thought, like, I don't know. And again, apologies for all the stuttering and stammering. I've just been a little tired. But, okay, I got to start cleaning this house. Thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate you all so much. Timmy as well appreciates everyone. Right? You crazy little varmint. Oh, he's a bad boy. Aren't you just a bad guy? You're just something else today. All right. He just laid down. He's like, I'm giving him back scritches. So he's like, yep, here's the place for me. Don't worry about it. All right. Well, feel free to share in the comments any life updates you're experiencing. I would love to hear how you're doing. You've heard an awful lot about me, blah, 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 and how I'm doing. I went into the hospital this morning. I told you, here's just a little update. And had a really good talk with the nurse. And the nurse is actually my mother's cousin. So that's kind of interesting. Not through my grandfather, but through my my mother's mother. And we just had a really good talk about like why my grandfather is where he should be. And because I was having a lot of guilt and, you know, a little bit of upset about him being in the hospital and a lot of questions from his family, as in like his cousins and nieces and things like that. And she laid out some really good points about the short-term memory loss and why someone may be able to carry on what seems like a very normal conversation, but their ability to care for themselves is greatly diminished because it's the short-term memory that suffers, and that leads to a lot of trouble. I mean, you know, like the classic leaving the stove on and, you know, things like leaving the water running. And she made a good point that that's also a danger to people in his apartment building. And then I had said, like, well, he used to like walk to the grocery store all the time. And I'm afraid that, you know, he'll get there and get confused somehow and won't be able to find his way home. And he doesn't remember his address anymore. And then she made the good point that even if he goes down to the lobby, if he doesn't remember his address, he doesn't remember his unit number, and he might not even be able to find his unit again on his own if he is just still within the building. So that's like a big problem, right? So not as much of one because obviously there's people around, but it's just still, you know, things to think about. And she said that even in the hospital, like he's had his times mixed up a lot of the time. And, you know, he'll like get up in the middle of the night and be walking around and think that it's morning, and they have to explain to him, you know, well, it's actually 3 a.m. And he thought it was midday, which may seem like, well, you're in the hospital. Like, of course, you're losing track of time, but there is a window in his room. So, I mean, you can easily look out the window and see that it is nighttime, right? So anyway, just things like that. So I felt like that was a productive conversation, and it really sort of eased my guilt. And yeah, it's just hard when someone he has vascular dementia. So it's just hard to obviously explain to someone because he does not have an understanding of why he is there. He thinks that he is fully capable of looking after himself. He can't make the connection that it's a danger for him to go home when he doesn't actually, he doesn't actually know where he lives. Today he had been asking for his razor, like his electric razor from his apartment. So I brought it to him and he said, well, what's that? And I said, well, that's the razor you've been asking for. He said, is that mine? I said, yeah. I said, do you remember it? He said, no. So, like he can't remember like a lot of things. So anyway, I'm feeling better today than I did yesterday. Yesterday was wild. Sleep is so important. As we know, but it is so important, to regulate your emotions. I don't think I've had a day like that in a long time. I just weepy. Holy smokes. I thought I was menopausal, even though my mom keeps telling me that I'm too young for menopause. And then I watched a bunch of videos about menopause and I realized I'm actually not menopausal. So I was like, oh, okay. I'm just overwrought. So, I was supposed to meet my friend tonight at the library, but I've just decided that I just want to be home. I don't want to be out. I want to be at home by myself and just clean and, yeah. Sorry, my cousin is texting me. Hold on, did I say? So my grandfather was moved into a different room today. Same floor, different room. And apparently it's much nicer. Okay, well, I'm going to upload this. Who knows? It's almost 2 hours long. Part of me is well, let's go. Let's keep reading. Let's make it a 2 hour long video. What do we care? But I won't. Because I know I will really start stuttering and stammering. I can just feel it brewing. And it's a long chapter, so I don't know. I hope you like it. I'm going to continue with it, so fingers crossed. Yeah, I don't know. I did say this, but I'm not sure if I finished the thought because my mind's everywhere right now. But I would love to hear how you're doing and what you're up to. So if you want to jump in the comments and give a little update, that would be lovely. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. If I'm up late and I'm feeling wild, maybe I'll do another chapter of the Haley Mills book just to see how it goes. And all right. Thank you so much. I will see you very soon.